A few weeks ago, devastating wildfires ripped across Los Angeles, reducing entire neighborhoods to ashes and displacing thousands. Entire neighborhoods were lost in an instant. I was watching this in horror from Mexico City, and I felt helpless. This was my home for 8 years. What could I do to help? And that's when I had connected with this incredible grassroots effort of volunteers through social media. They were led by a foundation called You're Just My Type, and they were mobilizing to collect and deliver supplies to those in need. People who lost their homes, their medical supplies, or were forced to evacuate and couldn't return home to their medical supplies. I immediately knew that I wanted to share this story. I didn't want it to fizzle. It was too important. So I immediately called Medtronic Diabetes based in Los Angeles, and I let them know, hey, I want to do this video, this documentary, and I need a budget. Within hours, they said that they were happy to support, and the production was on. We documented this movement, the volunteers on the ground, the stories of those impacted, and the crucial role of a patient advocate and nurse who pushed pharmacies to approve emergency refills. Medtronic Diabetes also stepped up to help patients access the life-saving supplies. And today, in our bonus episode of the podcast, we are sharing the full interview with Liz Van Voorhis, who led the ground operations for all the volunteers in Los Angeles. She was on her way to Los Angeles for a vacation to dog sit, get some fresh air, when she realized that there was an urgent need for aid, and she sprang into action. She didn't do it alone, though. She had a background in event production, which made her ready for this, but she partnered with You're Just My Type founder Laura Pavlakovich to organize supply efforts and get them into the hands of those who needed them most. My director, Dylan Leonard, also has type 1 diabetes. It was important for him and I to not accept any form of payment for this project. Every dollar that we received from Medtronic went right into the production of this film. And you'll actually hear from Dylan at one point during this interview. I do hope you watch the short 15-minute documentary we made that is on my YouTube channel. I've thrown a link to that in the show notes. Please share it. I think it's an inspiring video that will show the power of community, but also what people can do if disaster strikes near them. And if you would like to support to the efforts of You're Just My Type, they are a nonprofit. There is a link to their foundation in the show notes. You can learn more about them and consider donating. I hope you enjoy. Wow, look at this.
Hi.
You're on my podcast.
Yes, I'm excited.
Yeah, your story's incredible. I mean, we're in this huge space. Like, look at how big your operation has grown. It's amazing.
A lot can change in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember the first call we had and you telling me how you were just coming to LA for vacation, right? Like dog sitting. Take us into that. Like, why were you coming out here?
Yes, so I live in New York and I've been back there about a year. I actually was in Los Angeles for 3 years prior to that. I was a COVID refugee, as people like to call me. I escaped from the city and cold weather to be able to thrive out here during COVID. And I've been coming since 2017 when I started my business to LA frequently, and really have considered myself living bi-coastally. And I always joke that I know what it feels like to be the Bachelorette because I'm in love with two people. They happen to be cities, so my heart is really in both places. And even though I'm living back in New York, I come here frequently. I had the opportunity to dog sit for a friend who's out of town for work, and I wanted to escape New York winter, understandably, and be able to walk on the beach and just, work from a environment that was sunny. And my flight was scheduled for Wednesday, the 8th, and the fires broke out on Tuesday. And so I was getting updates on what was happening. And in fact, I had a birthday brunch planned for the following Sunday at one of the restaurants that burnt down Tuesday night. And so once that happened, we kind of started to understand the gravity of what was happening. And I have a lot of friends here. I was getting updates. I was supposed to fly early on Wednesday. I pushed my flight back a couple hours just to make sure, what were we walking into? I wanted to wake up in the morning and get at least some updates on what was happening, and kind of had a decision to make. Do I get on a plane and go, or do I scrap this trip? And I just had a feeling that I was needed for some reason. And so arrived on Wednesday. You know, it was wild here because everything is happening. Nobody really knows if another fire is going to break out, where the ones that are existing are moving. And, you know, while I was safe, it was tenuous. We were getting evacuation orders. And
what was the situation? Like, you land, like, what was going on?
Yeah.
What was the status?
Well, so we didn't have Wi-Fi on our plane. So an entire plane of people flying to Los Angeles for 6 hours have no idea what they are flying into. Everyone was nervous. And so we didn't know what we were flying into. And then, you know, to arrive and see smoke, and you know, I got to my friend's place and just tried to get my bearings, right? You know, I downloaded the app that everybody is downloading to get, you know, evacuation orders or updates on the fire, and it was like literally walking into a fire and not knowing what was going to happen. And so on the plane, I had spent some time thinking about, with no Wi-Fi, what could I do? How could I be of service? My background is experiential marketing and producing large-scale events. So the type of work to mobilize products and people and systems is what I do and have always done. And so,
and you have type 1.
And 29 years as type 1 diabetic. And, you know, I always joke that in a zombie apocalypse, I will be the first to go if I don't have access to my supplies and medication. So on the plane, I thought plenty of people are going to bring toilet paper and clothing and financial resources to those who need it. But what about people like me who are on a regular basis nervous about the amount of supplies that they have and access to them and the barriers that stand in the way of you being able to get them on any given day, let alone during a crisis? So on the plane, I had the idea I need to help get supplies into the hands of people.
Yeah, so how did you you wanted to do this?
Yes.
But how did you make it happen? How are you able to get look at this. We're surrounded by supplies.
Yes.
How did you get the word out?
You know, it's percolating in my head as I've landed and getting my bearings, and evacuation orders are going off and smoke's in the air, and you really don't know what's going to happen. And the first night I was here, it was just a bit of survival mode, right? I literally set alarms on my phone for 3 times during the night. I slept on the couch. I had a to-go bag because Venice is not that far from Santa Monica. And in the morning when I woke up, you know, doing a little doom scrolling on Instagram, I noticed that Laura from You're Just My Type had posted asking and putting the request out to get supplies. I followed Laura on Instagram. Her and I have never met, but I knew that she was doing extraordinary work with building community for type 1s and doing in-person meetups, both locally in Los Angeles and across the world. And so I sent her a message and said, put me in, coach. I was like, I can help you run this. At the time, I didn't know she was out of the country. So Laura was traveling.
She was in London, right?
In London for work. And, you know, what I saw was that people were trying to kind of talk amongst themselves and say, I have this, do you need it? I have this, I need it. And I knew based on the scale of the disaster that it would need a scalable solution. And putting systems in place is part of my background. And I knew, you know, we could easily get some systems in place. And so she was like, yes, absolutely. You know, we're only talking over DM at that point. And I created Google Forms so that people could submit supplies needed, donations needed, and so we could start to see on the back end what the actual need was, how much, where we could get supplies from. And the response was overwhelming. I mean, the first post that Laura put up, 500,000 people saw, and then all of a sudden we're getting all of these requests. Ultimately, we had over 500 people donate or offer to donate supplies from 35 states across the country, across the United States and 3 countries, and it was just extraordinary. And so, you know, I asked a friend, can we use your space to collect these shipments that are coming in? Because immediately people mobilized. Because you know, I know what it feels like to be in a position where you don't have enough supplies.
Yeah.
I had just gotten back from a trip to Thailand, and I had serendipitously met somebody who is type 1 diabetic. He lives in New York, 10 blocks from where I am, and we started chatting, and I was explaining how difficult it was preparing for a month-long international trip to have enough supplies to be able to feel comfortable traveling. And he said, I'm switching to this new version of CGM. I have 3 months supply. Do you want to come back and get it when you're back in the States? So this had just happened a couple of weeks before this disaster, and it was fresh in my mind about how a surplus of supplies can take away your fears and worries, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess we got connected through Andrew Belafonte was posting on social media, and then I shared that. There was a big response, and then when I saw that, I was like, I need to meet these other people who are involved, and then that's how we got connected. And then it just, I was like, I need to come here. We need to see this in person. So kind of tell me about you were staying at your friend's home, right?
Yes.
And that kind of, like, how long were you there? Because now we're in a big gymnasium. What was that transition
exactly.
there?
So I was staying at a friend's place in Venice, but I have great family friends who live in the Palms area, not affected by fires, in a seemingly safe space, and their home is located close to some of the major highways in Los Angeles. And I was like, immediately, can I have people ship things to your house? They said, no problem, send it here. And so, this all started Thursday morning. The message went up on Instagram.
The day after you arrived?
The day after I arrived, like 12 hours after I arrived. And then, in the next couple hours, I had the Google Forms submissions out. People started filling them out immediately because everybody started promoting it. So, what I brought to the table was the ability to mobilize, lead people, amass 400 volunteers that could drive supplies. But Laura brought to the table this extraordinary community and connections that she's cultivated over years. And so, the word started to get out immediately. People were shipping things, sending me tracking notifications right away. And over the weekend, we had 20 to 30 volunteers that were going through things people dropped off and shipments that started to come in, inventorying it, cataloging it so that we can understand what we had to be prepared to then start fulfilling.
And you're taking over someone's home right now.
I'm taking over the living room of somebody who is very gracious, but then...
And he was like cooking you meals, right?
Oh, he was making meals for all of the volunteers. Yeah, it was.
I love that.
Everybody was contributing in the ways that they could. And Andrew came, and I immediately recognized he has disaster relief background and extraordinary communication skills. Let me pull him in to help me because, I was the stopgap to the operation. And so I needed, I have a lot of experience leading large teams and large businesses, and I knew I can't have all the information up here. It has to be able to start delegating to people who can, take on their own responsibility. And so I had somebody in San Diego that was collecting supplies, bringing it to Orange County. Somebody in Orange County that was collecting supplies brought all of that up to Los Angeles. And so by the following Monday, our supplies doubled, and we were officially taking over his entire living room. And so we put a post out for where can we move? Not only do we need somewhere to store all of the supplies, but we also need somewhere people can start to come and pick up. And thankfully, we had the Culver City Mason Lodge and Masons reach out to us because one of their members is type 1 diabetic, and they saw the post and immediately got on the phone and said, come over here, we're happy to host you. It's a part of what we do with service in our community, and they've been helping along the way. And we have this center here where we can store all of our supplies, have people come in to receive supplies, and we've had quite a few people come through the doors, but we've also done over 30 home deliveries all across Los Angeles County over the last week.
Wow. Yeah. So how many volunteers were involved at this point?
We've had access to about 400 volunteers. So between, folks that reached out to us on social media or through You're Just My Type, network, and then all of a sudden, all of the other diabetes networks started pointing back to us. So we became the source for every single, diabetes organization, whether they were national or based in Southern California, and we became the resource for Los Angeles County. So if you go to, any of the resource pages, they point back to us as where to go if you need anything for type 1 diabetic supplies.
How are people finding you? What were the networks that were kind of sending people to you?
Yeah, so we did a couple different layers, and my marketing background kind of made it easy to at least figure out the approach to how to do outreach, right? At first, it was just social media, asking people to share. Once we moved in here and showed the supplies, we had 275,000 people view the reel that we put up, and it was shared 1,600 times. So people were getting the word out, and then other people saw it and shared, to their large communities. And then we started doing targeted outreach, because I know, getting the message out broadly is great, but we need to find those families that are in need of the supplies. And so we started reaching out to the diabetes organizations. We started reaching out to the larger shelters and anybody who's having people come in that need things, because this is not a simple equation. I can't just give somebody, a couple of supplies and think that they can fulfill the needs of the other person.
Everyone has their own treatment
cocktail.
Yeah.
And, it's been wonderful meeting all of these volunteers and people contributing, and you get to learn, you're on this, you're on this, you're on this, but it makes it very complicated, right? And so if you're on the end of this scenario, your home is burnt down, you're evacuated, you have to call 3 people to get emergency supplies, right? Shipments were delayed because of the fires and because of the weather in the rest of the country. And so we were not going to have one person, be worried about this if it could be avoided.
Yeah, well, and I heard that, doctors' offices were sending people here. Like, they
Yes.
knew what the situation was, how difficult it is.
I don't want to call any of them out for, any reasons, but they've been top endocrinologists in Los Angeles were on my cell phone, texting me, calling me, sending people to me.
What were some of the calls that you were hearing, some of the people that were reaching out that didn't have supplies?
It's heartbreaking. There were actually quite a few families that had multiple people in their family with diabetes. So we were fulfilling packs for people with 2 kids or a mom and a daughter. Many of the people, their homes did burn down. One of the things that was interesting is one of the gentlemen I spoke with, he didn't even know that he could call the supplier directly for emergency. He had been so burnt by having challenges with the insurance companies in the past, he thought he had to go through them, and he didn't want to deal with the hassle. His pharmacy is often out of his supply of insulin. So he didn't know where to go. And so, it's been wonderful, interacting with these folks and hearing their stories. And they've all, in the midst of dire crisis, they've wanted to volunteer or bring us food or do things to just show their appreciation. They also didn't want us to give them too much supply, because they knew there would be other people that needed it. And we were having to reassure them, don't worry, we've got you. We want to give you enough so you don't have to think about this for a while.
Yeah.
If our medical system gave us the supplies that we need to feel comfortable, we would not have to do this one-on-one all the time. So, I've been 29 years type 1 diabetic. I've been using CGM and pumps, for over 20 years, which require unique supplies, right? It's not just like a medication you get at the pharmacy. We get 30 days. That's it. So anything goes wrong and you are relying on a third-party shipper, you're relying on a third-party supplier, and the peace of mind to have enough supplies so that you can not just live your life, but thrive. I have a big life. I travel a lot. I have a big job. Like, I need to know I'm going to be okay at any given point.
Yeah, even today, I went to my endo earlier before shooting, and I was trying to figure out, okay, if I get a month's supply now, that will get me through February, but then I'm going to go away for 3 months at the end of March. So then I need to do a 3-month supply. So my insurance allows me to do a 3-month delivery over mail order.
Yeah.
Some insurances don't allow
Mine
that.
doesn't.
You're only allowed to have that 1-month supply. So that, first of all, I don't understand. I mean, the diabetes isn't going away.
It's not
so
going
what's
away.
the difference between the 3 or 1 month?
And if you're across state lines or in another country, it doesn't mean that it's going away. And so, I'm so grateful for marketplace insurance, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur. And so I can only have insurance through state marketplace, right? And I've had great plans in both New York and California when I was living in both places, but I can't get a prescription filled across state lines. So if you evacuated to Nevada, you can't get your supplies.
That's a problem.
That's a problem. Yeah.
Can I throw something in?
Yep.
What has all of this shown you about the diabetes community? Like, what has this
Yeah.
specific instance really like revealed to you?
So in 29 years of being type 1 diabetic, I've been a part of many different communities. I was a counselor at 3 different diabetes camps over the years. So I've always had community and connection in the type 1 world. This has shown me about this community that we take care of each other. We are resilient. There was I think he was 8 years old, an 8-year-old boy that came in to donate some of his supplies because he wanted to be sure somebody else, could benefit from them. And it's just been extraordinary in this community, and it also has restored my faith in humanity a bit because it's been wavering lately.
Yeah, I mean, the community was there to save me during diagnosis. I'm not surprised. I wouldn't say surprised, but I'm constantly seeing the community come out for people in so many ways. It's so inspiring, and that's why I wanted to share this story so people can see like the true power when it's needed. The T1D community was there for me at my diagnosis. It's why I do what I do today, because I know that there are people in need and don't have access to the education or the doctors or the medication that I and you are very fortunate to have.
Yeah.
So, and we understand how it feels to be high and to be low and to be alone and isolated. So when I heard your story, I just knew that we needed to share it with everyone.
Yeah. And I was the front and the face and the work, but I could not have done this alone. This is not my story, it's our story, because every single person that contributed a box of supplies, a nice note, a donation to help us, we went out and bought glucometers and things like that for people that were in need if we didn't have those particular supplies. Every person that reposted, this has been a village for sure.
Yeah, and Dylan has like a bunch of, I just want to read out like some of the stuff that you've received. I want to hear it again.
And I think also what's important about it is that oftentimes when you're in the mix, you don't realize the impact that you may have had, like the ripple effect. And so I think hearing those numbers helps you sort of realize the impact and how much of a difference you've made. But as you stated, 400 plus ready volunteers to process supplies or work at pickups and drive supplies, 35 plus on-site volunteers, 50 plus in-person supply donations, 156 people in Southern California responded to donate, 235 plus people across the country and globe responded to donate from Australia and multiple countries, Germany, Canada, 34 states, received shipments from, looks like about 20 different cities, 430 plus submissions for donation.
60 shipments as of today.
60 shipments, wow. 500 plus vials and pens, 400 plus CGM supplies, 1,500 plus boxes of pump supplies, 7,500 plus syringes, 13,000 pen needles, 18,500 test strips, among many other miscellaneous supplies.
How does it feel to hear all of that?
Like I said, a lot can change in a couple of weeks. If you had asked me a few weeks ago if this would have been what we were doing and what we could have made happen, I don't know if I would have believed it. But I'm the one on the receiving end of getting the thank you text from the people who are getting shipments. So in combination with the data around how many people we've reached and how many people have been involved, to me, honestly, it's been more of the, you don't know how much this means to me. I was, fearful, it's one less thing I have to worry about. Do you guys have angels working with you? Those are the things that have been the most impactful to me.
Yeah, fires aside, we both know what it's like to be on phone calls for hours, going from department to department, trying to advocate for ourselves to get the medication approved, filled, to understand what the pricing is for insurance before you get the insurance, and allowing these people to not have to be in those long phone calls, whether it be through this donation center or other people we've spoken to who work in offices advocating for patients. There are people out there that understand the struggle and are helping.
Yeah.
Were there any specific things that anyone said to you that just really struck you during all of this?
A woman that had lost her home and didn't know where she was going to live, she was just like, the world is upside down. I don't know which way is up, and this is just one less thing. I had one of our friends that we delivered to that you know of said that I had done a mitzvah, a very good deed. So, yeah.
It's been a common theme that I've heard that some people are saying, it was hard for me to accept help, but this is a moment that it's totally okay to accept help. Please, how have you kind of navigated that?
I just think it's easy to have empathy when you know what this feels like, and maybe not on the scale or the devastation of the loss that they've experienced, but I understand the administrative part people are going to have to go through, the grief that they're dealing with, not just today, not just this week, but for months and years to come. The loss of safety and security, and the things that I heard somebody say proof of life, that give them, totems of the experiences that they've had in this life. And so if they don't have to worry about this one thing or be on one more phone call, that was just the goal.
What's next for you? You came here for vacation, wound up not being a vacation.
And by vacation, I'm an entrepreneur and a business owner, so there's no such thing as vacation.
Right, yes.
I was going to be working. But
I understand that, a little workation.
Yes, exactly.
But, you just pulled off this huge operation.
Yeah.
What's next? A little break?
Hopefully I'm not just going to be like, peace y'all, and leave it all here and fly back to New York. So I spent the first 15 years of my adult life in corporate roles, and honestly, partially because of my diabetes. At the time, there were no pre-existing condition clauses, and I had to have a job that gave me insurance. I didn't have the benefit of taking a more non-traditional route, right? And so I experienced 6 major health hardships in 6 years, and the loss of my mom to brain cancer in the same time frame. And I knew I did not know my purpose on this planet. That experience showed me that I was just kind of floating through life, and you can have success and still not be fulfilled. And I realized I had to spend every day, every waking minute in pursuit of my purpose and fulfilling it for the rest of my life. So I know that I am intended to inspire others to become the best version of themselves. That comes to life in my business, Fit Collective, through what I do, helping organizations get healthier from the top down and creating corporate wellness experiences. But type 1 diabetes is a part of me and informs everything that I do, and has made health the number one priority in my life. So it's not necessarily a where do I go from here, but more how do I continue to make impact in the way that I know I can with my gifts, my talents, and the community of people that I feel like I've doubled my T1D community and friend base just being here the last couple of weeks.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying is purpose can be found in so many forms.
Yes.
It can be found in the span of 2 weeks or a career, but whatever that is, for anyone watching, if there's something that's important to you, there are people you want to help, just go do it.
We have one life. I heard the quote from Confucius, you have 2 lives, and the second one begins when you realize you only have one. And, I had a wake-up call through a tragedy that helped me live a more expansive life. And so I think, to your point, purpose and meaning, Viktor Frankl, in The Search for Meaning, talks about how, finding meaning is the purpose, right? So in these tragedies where I used to believe everything happens for a reason, I don't believe that anymore, because how can such terrible things in the world happen? But what I believe is that we are intended to seek and find meaning in everything that we do, and that's how we move forward in purpose.
Yeah, with every bad thing that happens to you, there's a lesson to be learned. And you have more power by taking something that really hurts and using it to the best of your ability. Well, Liz, I'm so glad that we finally got to meet. What you're doing here is incredible. Seeing this in person, it's huge, and I'm so glad that we're new friends. I'm so glad that we've met all these people, and I feel inspired from this. I mean, even just like being surrounded by a crew right now in LA telling stories, like, I want to do more of this, and I'm sure that a lot more will come out of this, wherever this takes you, wherever this takes me, and the other people we've been speaking to.
I think the importance is not just, we've done some incredible work the last couple of weeks that have helped a lot of people, but it is helping tell the story of why we had to do the work. And I think I'm so grateful to you for helping amplify and tell that story, because that's what we need to work to change and improve the lives of people with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, and also when you hear, the LA fires, people are evacuating, there's not an instant thought of like, how are people getting their life-saving medication?
Yeah.
So having heard that story and what you're doing, this is something that I really want people to hear about and to think about, so that it inspires other people like you and wherever they live, knowing that they can do something. They can mobilize and create a Google form. Like, you've created a structure that people can follow. And now this is documented, that people can hear all over the world on podcast platforms and YouTube in video form. But I just thought that it was important that everyone in our community hear what you were doing. So I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me and telling the story.
Come here, we're gonna hug.
Yeah.
For people listening, we're hugging. It's so great to meet you.
You too.
Thanks for listening. Now, go watch that short documentary if you haven't, and share it out if you feel inspired to do so. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Medtronic, for your support. I'm Justin, and I'll see you next week.